is European figure is about 35. In United States, many of the cities, people have to spend 40% of their total earning on housing. I, when I was in Jawaharlal Nehru University, I only paid 10%. When I joined as a professor in Germany, I had to shell out 40% in any case. He said, this is the housing that you must have, just a two-room unit. On an average, in India, people are reluctant to spend even 15% or 20% of their earning, and they would like to really get a house. Accommodations, housing is not that much of a priority. As your income level goes up, you do not necessarily spend 30%, 40% of their earning. Somebody who is getting about 1.5 lakh per month would get a housing, uh, rent about 30,000 rupees. So basically, there is a reluctance to spend money as high as the global average in the Indian context. And yet, when the government is thinking of pushing the rental housing for the poor, what could be the rationale? I was just asking myself that what is the reason why the government has brought in the rental housing thing so very strongly and wants to promote it. We will look into the structure of the rental housing scheme in detail, but let me give you the reason as I understand why the rental housing for the poor have been pushed. First, this scene of migrants walking back to their villages, to their small towns with children, and cycling and getting into the crowded buses and trucks and trains certainly shook the middle class and the policymakers. I always feel that data speaks volumes than the photographs, but I was convinced that all our data, we have been talking about the migrants not having access to drinking water, sanitation, and housing facilities. They cannot face a big pandemic in that kind of a situation. They feel mentally also upset. And certainly that was the reason why government said, let us do something. And there are 3 labor codes which have been passed. They talk about better working conditions. So they thought migrants cannot afford to buy a house, so let us promote rental housing, try to give them houses for 3,000 rupees or 7,000 rupees for two-room unit, for 3,500 rupees for one-room unit without toilet. And that is the perspective that they wanted to show that they are doing something for the migrant population. The second reason why I think is government is pushing is that it's a big embarrassment that something like 2.5 lakh houses built under JNNURM, Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, are vacant. Are we can skip this one. We can skip this one. Yeah, we'll come to the affordable rental housing complexes. Let me finish give the second reason that suddenly you had these houses vacant. They are standing vacant for the last 7 to 10 years. This is an ISO. Everybody say, oh, government has failed. They have built houses at long distances away from the city center. Nobody is taking them. Access to basic amenities is poor. Let us make use of them. So the government thought it's the best time to put in this vacant houses into the housing market without realizing that the number of dwelling units that are available under the government program, this is within the capacity of the government to central government immediately to put it in the market, is just between 1.5 lakh to 2 lakhs. That doesn't really answer even a part of the problem. We are talking about something like 8 to 10 million migrants coming into the urban centers. So that is something, but nonetheless, the government was wanting to be seen doing something for the migrants. So they have promoted 2 models under the affordable rental housing complexes. One is converting the existing dwelling units. Can we go back to the converting existing government funded vacant houses, and they would like to get some concessionaires. They would get into an agreement that you take these houses, make them usable, earn money, provide the minimum facilities, and then if you are making profit, again this clause is if you are making profit, share it in a reasonable manner under some kind of a contractual agreement. But they know it very well that even when the houses are being given to them free, they have to, comply with certain requirement. They have to provide the basic amenities. They have to repair the houses, retrofit the houses, maintain them, and rent it out, get them, recover the money from the poor tenants, and the rent is fixed. That is something is bothering them, that the houses are being given, but the rent that they can charge from the poor migrant will be decided by the government on the basis of certain surveys. That is model number one, which as I mentioned, is really just 1.5 lakh to 2 lakh units all through all the cities where the government has built the houses. The second is the government is trying to encourage the private companies. If they have some land available to them, they can construct, operate, and maintain the houses for the poor. But again, here the government is not giving them land because these companies must be having their own land. They can use this land for constructing rental houses for the poor and the migrants, for their own workers. And they can also provide dwelling units to other companies, act like an aggregator, and provide these dwelling units to different companies. They are workers, so that getting rent from them does not become a problem. India has the experience of rental housing in the 50s, and that failed miserably. Firstly, because it was away from the city center, which is the case even now. The vacant houses of the government are far away from the centers of work, and that's why not many people are interested in going there. But if the private companies which are operating within the city, if they have vacant land and build houses, provide those houses to their own workers or the workers which are in the neighborhood, arrange transportation facilities for them also, then the government will give massive amount of concessions in terms of tax benefits, other in terms of concessional loans. Can we go to the next slide, please? And in model one, I'll just quickly go over these two models. Hello?
Yes, sir. You audible now.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Model 1.
So I'm
He's back again.
I again got disconnected. This today
Yes,
is
sir.
terrible. It has never happened before. So as I was mentioning that under Model 1, the central government has the responsibility of giving these vacant houses to the concessionaires. They will take the houses. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Clearly, clearly.
And this will be given for 25 years. There will be time-bound approval, no hassles. Policy initiatives and incentives will be given. There will be institutional partnership for creating environment to invest in rental housing, and there will be tax concession. You see, the central government provides those vacant houses to the people who will take and manage them. Let's go to the next one quickly. The responsibility of the people who are taking the houses, they are called concessionaires. They will repair those houses because they have been lying vacant for last 7-8 years, retrofit, develop the complexes, but they have to provide the civic infrastructure like water, sewage, sanitation. For that, the expenditure will have to be made by them. The government only gives those houses for use for 25 years. The concessionaires who are taking the houses have to develop the social infrastructure, health center, community centers, neighborhood development of commercial activities. They have to operate and transfer these to the urban local bodies after the completion of the 25-year period. And the rental agreement, that is the critical thing. The expenditure incurred for the improvement of the facilities, retrofitting, repairing, and provision of social infrastructure will be that of the person who are taking the houses, but the rent will be fixed by the government as per rules and regulations and on the basis of some surveys being conducted. And that is where the major objection comes, that look, while we are managing the houses, the prices, monthly prices of the house will be determined by the external agencies. But one good thing about this is that the state government have very stringent tenancy laws, which makes it very, very difficult for the landlord to evict. Now, this has changed. There is a Model Tenancy Act, which really makes it much easier in case of the tenants not paying their rental properly or any unlawful activities, they can be easily evicted. And that's a promise which has been given by the government to the concessionaires. Go to the next one. Third partner is the local government. The local government has to select the concessionaires through a transparent process, and the person who is bidding for maximum positive premium to the urban local bodies, because if they are making profit, they have to share it with the urban local bodies, ULBs. But in case of negative premium, the lowest negative bidder will be selected and will get some viability gap funding. Now, urban local bodies will fix the affordable rent. 8% increase is possible annually, but not more than 20% in 5 years. This is Model 1, where the vacant houses are being given free to the concessionaires to manage, operate, and make profit, share a bit of the profit, but they have to function within the rules and regulations. They cannot give it to anyone for non-renting purposes. They cannot convert a big, two houses, make them into one. That is not possible. They have to give it, target it to the poorer sections, and the rent is fixed something between 3,000, 7,000, 10,000 only. That is model number 1. Let me quickly go to the model number 2, wherein the private companies and PPP model is being invoked. Go to the next slide, please, Asim. Now, here, the central government has a much larger role because the houses are not available. They have to be constructed. So it will facilitate the public and private entities to construct the houses, and the houses could be of 30 square meters, that is roughly 300 square feet, or 60 square meters of the carpet area, but not more than 1/3 should be 60 square meters. They have to be really 30 square meters, or dormitories where 10 square meter carpet area will be available to one person. In fact, the survey that WRI conducted showed that on an average, the poor construction laborers, auto drivers who get 15 to 20,000, they pay 500 rupees as rent, which is much less than 30%. 30% is supposed to be the norm, but they just take a small place to sleep, and they paid 500 rupees per person. But a family without toilet with 150 to 200 square feet pays about 3,500 rupees, and those who have a toilet pay something like 7,000 rupees. That roughly that kind of a arrangement will be made on the basis of the available rental things, but that may not make things very profitable. But the central government also has to give tax concessions. GST tax concession will be there. Income tax exemption will be also there, as it is there under Prime Minister's Affordable Housing Scheme. And please go to the next one. They also have to provide the project finance loan at low interest rate. They have to ensure that the concessionaire, the people who are building those houses, are not using the land for other purposes excepting building rental houses. These local government will also, central government also will promote innovative emerging construction system. They should get money from technology innovation grant under PMAY. They should promote rainwater harvesting and also environment friendly use of resources. And most importantly, these houses which will be built by the private companies and given on rent to their own workers or to the workers. In fact, the government is very careful that if you give to anybody without an arrangement with the employer, for example, if a company A has 200 units which are vacant, if it gives to anybody, then they may have difficulty in getting the rent. So they will make the arrangement through another company, and that other company whose workers are being accommodated, from their salary, you can deduct the rent. And that is the arrangement which is seemed to be feasible, because if you give directly to the people, given the poor conditions of the households, and also be given the democratic structure, it is not easy to evict a poor slum dweller from the houses. There will be big news, and I'm happy about this democratic processes. So, but it is very, very difficult to evict them. That's why a modern tenancy act has been invoked. Please go to the next one. The executive agencies, they will use the opportunity of building the dwelling units as per the requirements, not more than 60 square meter per unit, 30 and 60 square meters, and 60 square meter dwelling unit should not be more than 1/3. They have to provide the basic services. They have to tie up with the local industry and service providers and through aggregators to get the people who will stay in their dwelling units. And also the employer should be responsible for paying the rents, because taking the rent individually may be very, very difficult. They have to ensure sustained occupancies, and the rent again will be fixed through the local survey by the local government, but it can be increased biannually at 8%, subject to maximum of 20%. But they also have to take, the executive agency who are building the houses have to take the responsibility of organizing point-to-point transport from the places of the residence to the places where many of them are likely to work. Please go to the next one. This is the role of the state, union territories, or the local bodies. They will easily provide permission without any delay to build houses for rental purposes in the vacant land through a single window clearance. Now there will be relaxation in the floor area ratio, because this is a social necessity. So the accepted floor area ratio will be enhanced by 50%. The local government also provide design and other statutory support and approval within 30 days. And the local government is responsible for providing the trunk infrastructure. That means if those houses are in slightly away from the locality, they should be in a position to travel. So infrastructure should be provided at the city level, and the civic services should also be provided. And any conflict that may come up in terms of rental things would be decided under the new Tenancy Act, which is certainly not as much in favor of the tenants, because it is much easier now under the Model Tenancy Act, because different state governments have much stringent tenancy acts. The Model Tenancy Act certainly would encourage the people to make the investment. Now, given this scenario, I was talking to people in the government and HUDCO, Housing and Urban Development Corporation. What is the fate of this? First of all, as far as the government dwelling units are concerned, which are vacant, they can easily be converted into rental houses. But not many people are coming forward because they are located at you know long distances from the places of work, and arranging transport facilities is not that easy. That is one thing. But still, the houses are available free to the concessionaires, and there will be I think 10 or 12 applicants who have come up. But this is a possibility, but it doesn't solve the problem. As I said, not more than 2 lakh units are available in the large urban centers. The massive supply available is in the private housing. 10 million dwelling units are available, and they are not being put in the for rental purposes because it is difficult under the existing legal and institutional arrangements to really get back the houses when you need them. Secondly, the rental earning is much less than it is generally in the European context. In fact, today in the evening, we are having a discussion. The government of India is arranging a discussion on rental housing, trying to learn from the experiences of Brazil, Poland, Korea. Basically, how come they have been able to do that? What kind of concessions they have given for the rental housing, and how they are able to get a similar rate of return as they will get if you put the money in the fixed deposits. Unless you really improve the rate of return from rental housing, you cannot really ask people to put money. But just because rental earning is very low, that does not stop an owner to build, to invest in housing. How come when the housing rent is so low, why people are investing in houses? By the way, to say that the housing stock, ownership housing stock, has not grown very rapidly, and that's why we need rental housing, is a wrong empirical statement. I was chairing the Housing Shortage Committee for the 12th five-year plan. We noted that during 2001 and 2011, the growth rate of housing stock, ownership housing stock, was much higher than the growth rate of urban household, which really meant that we have built more houses during 2001 and 11 than the number of households. How come still there is a shortage? Many of the houses which are being built are going into vacant stock because people, after building, they do not want to give the dwelling units for rental purposes for the institutional and legal barriers. I would just like to stop here as far as the rental housing is concerned, but to open up a perspective, since this is called a perspective lecture, I want to show 2 slides from Prime Minister's Awas Yojana. I know under Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, there's a promise of making houses available for all by 2022. And there are 4 verticals. They call it vertical. One is urban slum rehabilitation program of the central government, where per household subsidy is 1 lakh, as 100,000. That is vertical number 1. And the government said, yes, 70 to 80% of the housing will be built for the slum rehabilitation. Rest, other 3 verticals will have a share of 20 to 30%. That was the vision, that was the perspective. But then there are other 2 verticals. One is this affordable housing, which is in partnership of the private players, and the beneficiary-led construction. Those people who have already a piece of land can go to the local body, take permission, and still get a subsidy of 1,50,000 rupees. But the maximum subsidy is given in the 4th vertical, wherein you just apply for a loan, and the loan subsidy is 6.5%, which actually works out to be 2,30,000 per person. And that is this money, which is a massive amount of subsidy. It was earlier targeted for the poorest, but over time they have relaxed the criteria, and even the middle class people who have 50 lakhs of earning, in a year, or even earning of 2 crore in a year are able to buy. There are vacant houses standing, costing 50 lakhs, 60 lakhs, 70 lakhs. Earlier, there was a ceiling on the value of the house. You could not buy something which is over 6 lakhs. But now, under the fourth credit linked interest subsidy scheme, you can buy any house. You need not construct the house. You can buy any house and you can get a subsidy of 2,30,000. I just want to show 2 slides, which is based on my empirical calculation. I would like to skip these slides because they may come up in the course of the discussion. Please go down. Please go. Hello.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Hello. Sorry again. I hope I'm picking up the thread from where I left them. The total shortage was estimated to be about 18 million for the 12th five-year plan. And out of that, we said that 95% of the shortage is for the economically weaker section and low income group. But if you look at the 4 verticals, the most successful vertical is those who are having land already with them and they're getting a subsidy of 150,000 rupees. Those in the urban areas who have either have got the land to subdivision, often
you might request sir to switch off his video.
sorry, am I audible again?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this is happening again and again. So as I was mentioning that the 95% of the shortage is for the economically weaker section and lower income group. But when I look at the overall performance in the four verticals, you find that the vertical wherein a person having a plot of land can get loan and build a house, that accounts for about 60% of the total houses being built up. Also, the people who are buying the new houses with the massive subsidy, this is credit linked subsidy program on which I have written a piece on EPW, that is also picking up. But the slum dwellers, they really need the housing units miserably. They are the people where you find the deprivation is maximum and the progress is not very high. We go down, please. Please go down. Yeah, go down. Yeah, this is one slide which I have prepared with lot of calculation. No, just the one above. The one before. Yeah, you know, what I did, I took the four verticals. Sorry. The next one, please. The next one. Asim? Yeah, this is the one. No, again. No, not this one, just one before. No. Yeah, this is the one. Can it stay for 2 minutes? You see, we have four verticals: slum rehabilitation, beneficiary led. Sorry, why is it? Yes, just keep it stable. Now, what I did was to do a quick calculation that the cost of the house is 3,300,000. I've given a dollar figure at PPP as for an international group. I prepared this. So that is the cost of a dwelling unit of 300 square feet. That is roughly 30 square meter. That is the cost. Though no land cost, because slum dwellers are supposed to get free land. Government subsidy is 1 lakh, which is 100,000. So the actual cost comes to 200,000. 2 lakhs is the cost. Now, the monthly payment for this is 2,000 rupees per month. Is the who get the houses? Is it feasible? My calculation tells me that even when poverty line is taken in the urban areas, something like 15,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees is feasible with difficulty. But certainly land cost cannot be passed on. 3 lakh is the cost of construction, 1 lakh is the subsidy, 2 lakh rate of interest. I go by the usual rate of interest. So this seems to be feasible, affordable for the slum dwellers, provided land is given. But that is where the basic, hindrance is coming. Beneficiary-led construction, wherein people have a plot of land and the cost comes slightly higher. Not 3 lakhs, but 3,60,000. 150 is the subsidy. 1,50,000 is the subsidy. Now you have to pay monthly installment of 2,100 rupees. This is also feasible because, for the beneficiary-led house construction, the households have higher income. So these two seem to be feasible. But if you take, PPP model of affordable housing, when government is working with the private sector, the cost immediately goes up because land cost has to be borne, and per month the installment comes to rupees 6,000, which I believe cannot be targeted for the poor. If you are saying that 95% of the shortage is for the poor, and if you have PPP affordable housing wherein a household has to pay 6,000 rupees per month, that is certainly beyond his capacities, and ultimately you're targeting to the middle class. Similarly, credit linked subsidies, also the monthly payment comes to be much higher than what they can afford. So my conclusion from this is that the government has set a target of providing 11 million dwelling units, and the rate of sanctioning is very high, particularly after Mr. Hardeep Puri has come, and I had a couple of interactions with him. And I said, yes, you are going to reach the target of 11 million dwelling units, but you are not going to reach the target of addressing this to the poorer sections of the population, to the slum dwellers, because my calculations tell me that for the two verticals where the success rate is very high, they are not being targeted to the poorer sections, but the government agencies feel happy that the program is taken off. People are taking these houses, but who are taking the houses is the critical question. Asim, the last slide, the next one. The next one, this calculation, no, up. No, you're going down. Up, 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 up.
It's end. It's the end, sir.
No, you're go up, huh? Before that. This one, immediately, no, you're skipping. Come down. Down. No. Yes, next one. Just next one. Yes, this one. Can it remain? Now, this is, I did a benefit cost analysis for Copenhagen consensus. This is first is beneficiary-led construction of houses where the household have possession of land and they are building the houses. We find that the benefit cost ratio depends on the rate of discount rate, and rate of benefit cost ratio is 1.32, 1.29, 1.24, which is more than 1, which means this is desirable. The benefits are highest. This is convert the flow of benefits into present time, and then cost and benefits are calculated the present value, and then ratio is 1.32 if the rate of discount rate is 3%. Now, affordable housing scheme, this is the public-private partnership. You find the rate of social rate of return is even higher than the beneficiary-led construction, because poorer sections are getting, we have given an extra premium for the poor people getting the houses. But the maximum benefit cost ratio, which we calculated, in fact, this paper is in the internet, we calculated the benefit cost ratio for different verticals under the PM Awas Yojana, and you do find that it is much higher under integrated slum rehabilitation program. The benefit Hello, let me, under integrated slum rehabilitation program, the benefit cost ratio is 2.7 compared to 1.3 under I'm sorry. So I think I have more or less concluded. I basically said that the benefit cost ratio works out to be much higher for the slum areas
I would suggest that you can use this time to put in, write down our questions in the chat box, because sir has another meeting very quickly. So if we can summarize those questions, we can ask him those.
Ipsai,
Yeah, Arvind.
I have tried to share the screen like the PPT. Is it visible to all of you?
It came for a second and then it went off. We now have your screen, but this is
Okay,
yeah.
actually, I am also using my mobile because there is no electricity, and that's why I'm using mobile internet also.
Okay,
Uh,
but it did open. It did
Okay,
open.
okay,
Yes.
I'll try again. Now it is clear.
Yes,
Yes.
Arvind, it's fine.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Now, what I did, I used my wife's mobile to give the hotspot, and now I think it will remain stable. So, as I was explaining, that the social rate of return is much higher under integrated slum improvement program, but that's where the allocation has been least and the number of dwelling units built for them have been low because of institutional and legal problems. So, my suggestion to the minister and also the other people concerned was that it's not just the overall target of 11 million, which is important, but also whether we are targeting the poorer sections, because the Housing Shortage Committee has clearly mentioned that 95% of the shortage is for the poor, economically weaker sections and LIG category. I would like to stop here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and thank you very much. That despite all the internet issues we all face today, we were able to, get a glimpse of something that is so as important as rental housing, which is one of the key areas of importance in understanding, urbanization. There are a couple of questions. I know that you have another global seminar coming in. Just to ask two of them. One is that about how does this answer the concerns of the seasonal migrants, and are there any thoughts on that, given that they might come and leave the cities?
I think if there is again issue with this
Right,
connectivity.
right. And if he has a seminar at 3:30, I don't know how he will be able to answer these also.
Actually,
Hello.
from morning onward, there is no electricity in this area.
Can we have questions?
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, sir. There are
Well, the technological failure.
yeah. So two questions. One is that, how does it respond to the issues of the seasonal migrants? And the other is that what is the socio-political reason for the discourse of India's growing urbanization, despite there being evidence to the contrary?
As far as the first question is concerned, that how rent housing scheme help the migrant and the unorganized sector of workers, I have a feeling that the basic intentions are right. Migrants cannot afford to, buy the houses. They have to have rental housing, and the houses available at the affordable rent of 3,000 to 5,000 or 7,000, that's the amount one can think of. If you're talking about the vulnerable and seasonal migrants, they would not be getting more than 15, 20,000 rupees per month. So asking them to pay more than 10,000 would be certainly impossible. So 6 to 7,000 is the limit, which will be fixed for the rental houses. Whether it is model 1, where the government is giving the house
Arvind, is it possible, because the slides are done, can we get him on the phone and put it on speaker?
I'll try. See.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, sir. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, I'm sorry, I changed my venue. I came to the balcony. Maybe here the connection is slightly better. So as I was saying, that the intention of government trying to provide dwelling units for 3,000 rupees per month, 6,000 rupees per month is certainly laudable. But the point is, not many private companies are coming up, and just 1 plus 1.5 lakh dwelling units which are available to the government, if only that is brought for the migrants, it is really not meeting their requirement. It's a good gesture. It's an indication at the policy level that we are trying to do something. But unless you get the private corporate sector in a big way, and I think the solution lies in getting these 10 million dwelling units in the urban areas which are lying vacant into the market. I'm not saying these houses, if they are brought into the market. In fact, I was talking to a senior person in Niti Aayog. 10 million units are vacant. You just divide them into two, make it smaller units, you get 20 million dwelling units. All housing shortage is solved. But obviously, that's not possible. These houses are much bigger houses. But if these houses come to the market, maybe people will move, the middle class will move to the higher category, and these smaller units will be available to the poor. So that is my suggestion, that the rental housing, uh, the way it has been envisaged is not going to address their problem. It's more important that we try to get the vacant houses into the market and see that really targeted house construction takes place. There has to be much larger incentive to the private sector if they have to provide dwelling units at 3,000, a rental value of 3,000 and 6,000. As far as overall political economy of urbanization is concerned, I think there is an elite capture. The upper middle class and the middle class, they have really controlled the institutions. And you find many of the benefits in terms of access to basic amenities, housing, and other things are being cornered by the upper middle class. And percentage of poor in the urban areas, by the way, it has declined. Percentage of slum dwelling population has gone down. Think about it. The projection was the slum population will go up from 63 million to 95 million. That was Pranab Sen committee predicted. The slum will go up from 2001 to 2011 from 63 million to 95 million. But actually, slum population did not go up. It went up from 63 million to 65 million. Percentage of slums went down. Percentage of poor is declining in the cities. So there is a urban middle class capture. And that is the reason why I find that the poor migrants are not really getting the fair deal. They are facing an unjust situation. And I know that those who have gone back, they will come back to the cities. At least 70-80% of them will return back, because the employment opportunities in the rural areas are not coming up in that way. But I wish And there is some policy concern that the cities should be welcoming the poor migrants. They should make access to housing and basic amenities much easier. And that is the, at the policy level, we are talking about that. By the way, there is a committee which has been set up by Ministry of Labor. I'm co-chairman of that committee. We are trying to find out the problems of the domestic workers, problems of the migrants in terms of access to basic amenities, and the government is promising to do something. But, well, given the political economy and the capture, elite capture, as it is popularly mentioned, the middle class and upper class capture does not allow the institutions to function for the poor population. And that is the concern that I would like to share with the young students and researchers of TISS Hyderabad. Any other issue? Now I think the connection is stable through the telephone.
Yes, sir, but except that we are slightly worried about your next seminar.
What time is it?
It is 3:21 now.
No, we can have another 10 minutes.
Okay, great. So there's one question from Saket who says that budgetary allocation of the government of India has not been consistent for housing under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which also aimed to provide housing for all by 2022. It can be seen in the implementation of the schemes as only 31% of the housing complexes have been developed till 2020. What are the mechanisms that government is looking at to resolve these funding gaps?
No, I think this is a very, very important question. In fact, if you look at the budgetary allocation from Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, I'm talking about the urban component, not the rural component of PMAY. And you look at the budget for the last 4 or 5 years, you find in the initial years, after launching the mission with a lot of fanfare, the allocation was something like, 1,000 crore or 2,000 crore, because the program did not take off. Not many housing units were sanctioned. But I must give credit to the present minister. After he joined, the sanctioning rate went up significantly. In fact, in a year, about 1.5 million dwelling units have been sanctioned. In 1 year, the target was 11 million over a period of six years. So I was very happy about this, that number of sanctioning has gone up. But the two twin problems, one is sanctioning is done not for the vertical, which is giving highest social rate of return, not for the slum dwellers. It is for those who already possess land and wanting to build the housing units, or those who want to take loan and buy the vacant houses. So many people say that this PMAY, Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, is allowing the real estate people to sell their houses because there is a subsidy of 2.5 lakhs. Earlier, they could not sell. So it is in a way helping the vacant houses to be sold in the market. So that is an issue. And I personally think that the government targeting should be done. And what happened in the last 2 years, when I was talking to the people in the ministry, the allocation for housing, although sanctioning has gone up, allocation has not gone up. I said, how come you're only maintaining 6,000 crore? Because this has to go up. Your number of units which you have sanctioned, they need to be backed up by financing. They said, no, they will borrow money. There's another extra budgetary resources. Extra budgetary resources will make the houses much more expensive. So I have a feeling that the sanctioning rate has not been backed up by financial allocation in the budget. And that's a major worry. And when I talked to the minister concerned, this was mentioned that, okay, budget is not supporting, we have extra budgetary resources. Extra budgetary resources means much higher cost, and the cost will go up and it will still become unaffordable. So while I compliment the ministry for meeting the target of total dwelling units, 11 million to being constructed under PMA, Prime Minister Awas Yojana, targeting remains and is a critical question. And, the slum dwellers, if they have to get justice, the land issues, land title issues have to be sorted out. And finally, one more point I want to mention. All these Prime Minister's Awas Yojana is valid only for the statutory towns. What about the non-statutory towns? which are urban, but this government has not, recognized them. And Registrar General says that these non-statutory towns are much worse than rural areas, than actual slum. The whole town is a slum. So I have a feeling that the government excluding the non-statutory towns from their program is also a serious handicap. Any other?
What are the mechanisms of keeping an eye and a check on private companies and the concessionaries that they go by the proposed law and not misuse the advantages given to them and the benefit reaches the needy?
I think this is a
I
very
think you have
critical
partially
issue.
addressed.
Pardon me?
You have
This is-
partially addressed.
And this is an important issue that you are involving the private sector as concessionaires or to build houses, giving them massive subsidies, concessions in GST, concession in income tax, so that they build houses for the migrant workers. Fine. But what is the control? What guarantees that they will really build the houses and not give it to their own people or convert them, make bigger houses? We know there are cases, even the government provided houses have been bought by one person, four flats, and converted them into middle class unit. That is likely to happen if the whole thing is in the private hands. But now the government, if they want to control them, regulate them much more strictly, they may not come forward. You are trying to, on the one hand, incentivize them, say that please come, and even if you are making losses, we can make up some of your losses. But you must see to it that you give the houses to the migrants, to the vulnerable sections, to the unorganized workers. That is the dilemma. But I have a feeling that some balance will have to be maintained so that you don't have very strict control in a manner that there are the inspector Raj comes up and the private sector gets harassed by the government officials. That harassment has to stop. But I think it should be possible to maintain a balance and encourage the private sector, provided right kind of incentive environment is created in terms of tax exemptions, in terms of income tax and GST remissions, and also the subsidized loans which are being available to them.
Right, sir. Also, sir, sometimes we feel that the pockets of the real estate giants are so deep that they would rather wait to capitalize once the markets are up, rather than give it over, as we were talking about this whole idea of reducing or converting a large apartment into 2 small dwelling units.
No, I think you are right that we have given land to many big companies for garbage disposal in Ahmedabad, many other cities. They said, okay, we'll collect the garbage and take care. Excel Industries have taken up in a couple of cities, and then require certain land, and land is given to them for garbage disposal. But actually you find that the private companies take the land and use it for some other purposes. They don't require that huge amount of land for garbage disposal. So land is very precious thing. And once you allow the private companies to use the vacant land for certain specific purpose, government has to create an institutional system to ensure that houses are created really for that purpose. Otherwise, the whole purpose will be lost. They will use the land for other purposes, which gives much higher rate of return. You are trying to force them to keep within the bounds so that the social rate of return goes up, because you are addressing the migrants and the vulnerable workers, but commercial rate of return may not be very high. So that's a dilemma, and the government has to maintain a proper balance in seeing that. Right?
Yes. Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Thank
I'm
you
so
so much
sorry
for
that there has
taking-
been this technological disruption, which was beyond my
So it's
control.
not in our hands.
It's
So
the-
it's like-
Can I ask last question? Or
Yes.
Arvind.
yeah. So, sir, we have many times we have read from your article also, and also you have closely worked with the various ministry which deals directly with these issues. I directly come to the question. Recently, you have means again and again talked about the suburbanization and this rurbanization, and obviously this because of the peripheral settlement of most of this vacant housing stock, because of the issue of lack of connectivity and lack of employment also. How do you see that? Because you have been part of the policy making also, that in spite of the National Commission of Urbanization, which has also recommended for in formulating certain kind of programs which could address these issues for a small and medium town, so that they could be promoted, and largely we could address the challenges which is emerging because of the larger concentration of most of the fund and other urban development programs in metro cities.
No, Arvind, you are right that we, in the last 2 decades, we have evidence that many of the middle level towns are growing, and also a large number of new urban centers have come up with population of 10 to 15,000. And that's where the shortages of housing is pretty high. And as I mentioned, Registrar General said that many of these small towns, the new non-statutory towns, are worse than villages and also worse than slums. The entire town is a slum. So if the attention is given to the to a more balanced urbanization, I think it would be desirable, and you can take care of the housing shortages because land costs are not very high. Uh, Providing slum improvement program in big cities is a challenge because land cost is so high and there are so many vested interests trying to grab the slum land, and that's why the slum lands are not being given to the slum dwellers free of cost. No state government wants to give them because even the government agencies are objecting. Oh, it's our land. Railway says it's my land. How can I give it to the slum dwellers? So I would think that yes, a more balanced settlement structure would be desirable. But in the large cities, if the housing has to come only in the distant areas because inside the city land is not available, I think there is no option. You don't have land inside the city. You have to provide housing, the slum improvement programs. You have to take up in the peripheral areas and provide decent housing stock. But then you have to arrange your transport system properly. And you have to also see to it that employment opportunities come up. You locate some of your new economic opportunities in the peripheral areas. Do this planning because you cannot leave the migrants and the workers in the peripheries and arrange no transport. Either you provide proper connectivity or take the economic activities to the nearby areas. That seems to my mind to be the only way out of this complex situation.
Thank you, sir.
Okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah.
Okay, with that, we come to the end of this really very interesting and session and a learning opportunity for all of us. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time. We understand you are extremely, preoccupied with other commitments. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much.
being
And my
part of it.
apologies for this disruption.
Not at all, sir. It's
We have
not.
no
It's
more
beyond
control.
our control completely.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.